22 servicemen and women commit suicide every day as a result of post-traumatic stress or other mental health issues associated with transition from military life to civilian life. And I wanted to clear up any possible misinterpretations that maybe from what I said yesterday. I said, this is pointless, I'm just doing this for my health. This is coming out of an article that I read online by a veteran where he said that this isn't raising awareness of very much, and I felt that it was a reasonable argument to make and reasonable criticism, and being reasonable criticism we'd taken on board and responded to and reflected upon, which I did. And I said from that point of view I would be adding something that I would say before I do the press-ups for each of these. There's something else that he said in that article that I've been thinking about, is he said we don't want to be seen as victims, which you can fully understand. When you portray somebody as a victim or see somebody as a victim, you are removing agency from them, and you're taking their pride away. No one really wants to be seen as a victim. However, at the same time, we live in a culture where you have to be seen as a victim before you get any sort of empathy or sympathy. So, I wanted to talk about the two sort of ideological narratives that are conflicting on regards veterans, and one is the hawks and one is the doves. Now, I'm very much a dove, very much a peacenik. When I was growing up, when I was a teenager, I wouldn't buy a red poppy unless there were white poppies available, which there never were white poppies available, so I never bought a red poppy. If white poppies had been available in my school or at a local charity, I would have bought a white poppy and then bought a red poppy, but I certainly wasn't going to wear a red poppy until I had a white poppy firmly on there to say that I disapproved of war itself. Of course, you can disapprove of war and still think that help needs to be given to veterans. Here I am speaking. But I wanted to recognise not only those service persons who had suffered as a result of war, but also those people who suffered as a result of refusing to go to war, the conscientious objectors, those who were subjected to white feather campaigns and were publicly ostracised for their decision not to go to war, and some of those that were shot. They changed their mind when they were out there. Particularly as some of those that were shot as deserters were probably already suffering from post-traumatic stress. So I think it would be very wrong to ignore them and to just glorify what we're going to call the heroes. That's going to be misinterpreted now. Never mind. Well, okay, so this is the issue. There are two, we are given a dichotomy, and like all dichotomies, it's probably a false dichotomy, which is that we see these people as heroes or we see them as victims. And if you are pro-war, you tend to see them as heroes, and if you're anti-war, you tend to see them as victims. And here's the thing, is with the hawks and the doves, is actually veterans generally, or particularly wounded or damaged veterans, generally get ignored. And I'll give you an historical example, although it's probably not unique, but the Thanksgiving service at Westminster Abbey after the Falklands War, in which those who were wounded were hidden behind columns, so they were out of the view of the cameras, because Thatcher didn't want anything to get in the way of the war being portrayed as glorious and something to rejoice about. The Archbishop of Canterbury at the time wanted to pray for the dead of both sides, which Mrs. Thatcher was furious about. I think the most important thing there, though, was the fact that the wounded were hidden away. The pro-war side of the argument don't like to admit to, or don't like to give too much recognition to those damaged by war, because it kind of defeats their argument. Whereas the pacifists would, even though they would acknowledge veterans at all, because they're still the military, and we tend to not be that keen on the military. If we are prepared to acknowledge them, we only feel comfortable acknowledging them as victims. Is there anything between a hero and a victim? I noticed that a lot of the veteran charities, and I think actually one of the ones associated with this 22 days is called Action for Heroes. Is there any way of talking about veterans without glorifying the idea of making oneself disposable, glorifying the idea of giving up one's individuality to military and blind obedience to authority? And actually I think there is. So what I was saying was that the depiction of veterans as victims, or the depiction of veterans as heroes, are both fictional ciphers that serve two competing narratives, but neither of them are really how veterans see themselves. In fact, I was reading from this article in the Globe and Mail. Both victim and hero are ill-fitting and outdated words, legacies from the era of conscript military. Most experienced soldiers I know feel gravely uncomfortable with hero. In a professional, modern military, a major part of training is to disabuse soldiers of any notions of heroism, to prevent such lunges for personal glory, to emphasize planning, teamwork and skill. Acts of heroism do happen, but often the best soldiers are those who never experience them. Worse, there has been psychological research suggesting the ubiquity of public hero narratives is making it much harder for battered and emotionally wounded soldiers to recover from their psychic disabilities. That was a Canadian article. And there is also an opinion piece on CNN by a chap called Eric Liu. I don't know why I said that with French, actually. He's not French. He's Asian. He could be French. It's unlikely, though. He says, regarding the hero narrative and the victim narrative, he says, to be clear, both narratives have a basis in reality. More veterans than can be counted have indeed been damaged by war, and more than can be counted are indeed heroes of war. They have earned every bit of support, care, honour and gratitude we offer them, and often more. But the hero and victim portrayals emphasises two messages: that vets belong on a pedestal and that vets need your compassion. The veterans I know are looking for a third message: vets can be great citizens back home. Now, talking about false narratives, I introduced one right at the beginning of the video, and I didn't realise it was false at the time, which is I suggested that the 22 suicides a day was connected to PTS. Actually, that doesn't bear out. The more you dig around, this is a terrible thing about reality, is the more you think you know, the less you actually know, and the more you know that you don't know. Do you know? So, as I've read more, I've become more aware that I know nothing. So, The 22 may be a misleading figure. It's the particular study that estimated the 22. The majority of them were over 60, so they hadn't recently seen combat. And studies on recent veterans found that those that hadn't seen combat were actually slightly higher, more likely to commit suicide than those that had, which is a little puzzling. There certainly is an elevation in the chances of committing suicide if you are a veteran. It's about 50% higher. But it does seem to be, within the first 3 years of returning to civilian life, that the suicides always happen. It does seem to be, as that veteran in the article I quoted yesterday was saying, it's going from being somebody who has a function to suddenly finding that you don't have a function anymore. It's going back to society and finding yourself useless. And or not having a significant function, or feeling useless. And also isolation. You go from being part of a big family to being isolated. These significant risk factors are, or being male and being unmarried are two significant risk factors. Although having said that, although the female veterans are a much smaller proportion of the number of veterans who commit suicide, they are twice as likely to commit suicide as women who are not veterans. It has been suggested that maybe because they have more access to guns. I don't know if that's true. It could be for exactly the same reason as it is amongst the men, that they go from a feeling that they're part of a big group that stick together and have some sort of bonding, and suddenly finding they're not part of a group anymore. Women tend to be better at maintaining support networks, or finding support networks than men are. So I think we're actually looking not so much at PTS, but we're looking at isolation and unemployment and making people feel useful. So that makes it a bigger, broader subject, a little more nuanced, a little more complicated, and I kind of wish that I had just stuck with just not checking out the facts, because the narrative is so much simpler before I start checking out facts, and no, it isn't simple at all. So I'm going to link to these because there is obviously an issue with veteran suicide and the transition between service life and civilian life. There are also issues with PTS, and there's also issues with how counselling services are made available and attractive to men. I suggested this before, that actually one of the things with counselling services is it's really not a good idea to tell men they need help, because actually that's a sort of, males consider that to be an insult, to be told they need help. And actually a better word would be an alliance. Rather than you go to a counsellor to seek help, you go to a counsellor to forge an alliance, because counselling isn't a process of getting help anyway. I mean, I've been through counselling myself, and counselling isn't about getting help. It's it is something you do yourself. Counselling isn't done to you, and a counsellor is there as a guide So it's still the patient's struggle. Wouldn't that be more? That'd be a more attractive way to put counselling, especially to men who are consider themselves to be warriors, is forge an alliance with a counsellor. Anyway, that's probably a spurious and stupid thought. Maybe it's not, I don't know. Tell me, is that stupid? I don't know. Anyway, I'll do those press-ups now, shall I? And I'll probably cut any of this that sounds like it's me talking bollocks. I think some of it might be me talking bollocks. Alright, okay, 22 is it? Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah, hopefully that's not complete bollocks and I never do it again, because that was